In Charleston, bells tolled the curfew every night, the signal that all slaves had to be off the streets. Charleston was the major point of entry for Africans brought to North America in the 18th century. Between 1700 and 1775, some 40% of enslaved Africans brought into the 13 colonies came through the port of Charleston. Officially, in 1808, the foreign slave trade was abolished, but American-born slaves continued to be bought and sold until the end of the Civil War. The Old-slave-mart on Chalmers Street in Charleston was used for slave auctions starting in 1852. It became a museum in 1938. In fact, it was the first African-American museum. Today, the Old-slave-mart-museum recounts the story of Charleston's role in the slave trade through a series of exhibits, including original artifacts, documents, and photographs. As an institution, slavery limited the most basic human freedoms. Slavery was not restricted to the plantation. Many slaves were also purchased by city dwellers to perform a variety of tasks. Though the money a slave made from such jobs was usually paid directly to his master, some slaves negotiated to keep a portion of their wages to purchase their freedom or the freedom of their wives and children. Enslaved African Americans contributed to the rich urban culture that evolved in Charleston, and today, the city's cuisine, patterns of speech, and its customs and manners reflect their influence. The Old-slave-mart-museum is a starting point to discover the effect of slavery on a city, a country, and a people.
The Battery is a landmark located in Charleston, South Carolina. Not only is this a significant landmark in the city, it also acts as a defensive seawall and a public walkway. Named for a Civil War coastal defense artillery battery at the site, it stretches along the lower shores of the Charleston Peninsula. It is also bordered by the Ashley and Cooper Rivers, which met here to form Charleston Harbor. Historically, it has been understood to extend from the beginning of the seawall at the site of the former Omar Shrine Temple to the intersection of what is now Murray Boulevard and King Street. The higher part of the walkway, paralleling East Battery, as the street is known south of Water Street to the intersection of Murray Boulevard, is known as the High Battery. Fort Sumter is visible from the Cooper River side and from the point, as are Castle Pinckney, World War II aircraft carrier, USS Yorktown, Fort Moultrie, and Sullivan's Island. The landmark was very important to the early history of the city. In 1737, Brotown's Battery, later known as Fort Wilkins, was built here. During the 1750s, a seawall was constructed using large boulders, stone, and masonry. Burton's Battery was decommissioned and demolished in 1789, but when a new wall and its walkway were completed in the 1820s, locals just referred to it as we know today, the Battery. The centerpiece of the Battery is called White Point Garden, which got its name from the big piles of the sun-bleached oyster shells that originally covered the ground. White Point Garden boasts large shady live oaks and oyster shell paths that lead visitors by statues, canyons, and memorials. The Williams Music Pavilion, a 1907 bandstand, still sits in the middle of the park and still hosts concerts as well as weddings and picnics today. The Palmer home in historic Charleston is one of the Holy City's most iconic mansions, frequently photographed and often depicted in paintings of the grand homes along the Battery. This was built between 1847 and 1849 by John Ravenel, a wealthy merchant and president of the South Carolina Railroad Company. The home remained in the Ravenel family until 1953. In 1953, after John Ravenel got rid of the house was in for a good surprise with new owners with new intentions. One of the biggest historic landmarks around the Battery is called the Pink Mansion as we know today. The Pink Mansion is located at 5 East Battery Street. This is one of Charleston's most visible homes, with its unusual large garden, expensive hardware, and its great location of the harbor, and its amazing location. It is located in the center of White Point Garden. Many people believe that this house has changed a little bit since it was built in the mid-19th century. Although it's seen few alterations recently, at least since it has gained its signature pink color after its former owners took possession of it in 1959. In realization, the house has seen many changes over time, even as its most signature interior spaces have remained largely intact and it's continuing to change today. Its new owner, who is Scott Besant, hired Glenn Keyes and contractor Richard Marks to help restore it. Scott Besant hired Keyes and Marks to repair past water damage and protect it from future floods and convert it from a bed and breakfast style living to a single family home. Their work has been underway for more than 2 years now and is expected to take another year to finish up all the work. Their project involves more than securing the house for future generations. It also involves new research into its extensive history, work that sheds new light into myriad changes and residents who live there.